"I can't take it anymore, be quick." And what the rancher did left everyone breathless. Growing up in the small town of Willow Creek, she imagined a life where mornings were peaceful. The sun rose gently over the hills, and everyone's problems could be solved with a kind word or a helping hand. But as she reached her mid-20s, reality had proven far harsher than her youthful imagination. From the moment she woke up each day, Maria carried the weight of responsibility that seemed far heavier than her slender shoulders should bear. Her family was kind, but they were also struggling. Money was tight, bills piled up faster than her small income could manage, and the constant pressure to make things right for everyone left her drained before the day had even begun. She worked long hours at the local grocery store, smiling politely at customers who never knew the battles she faced in her own home. The town itself was small, almost too small for secrets to last. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and gossip traveled faster than the wind that swept across the open plains surrounding Willow Creek. Yet Maria's struggles remained mostly hidden. She had perfected the art of smiling through pain, of laughing when she wanted to cry, and of keeping her true feelings locked away where no one could find them. She felt like she was living two lives, one the public, smiling face, and the other the quiet, exhausted soul who longed for relief. Every evening, she would return to her modest home at the edge of town, where the small garden and the creaky wooden porch offered some comfort. It was there, in the solitude of her room, that she allowed herself to breathe and to finally acknowledge the stress that had built up over the years. She would sit by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks, and wonder how people could face the same world every day without feeling crushed. She sometimes whispered into the silence, wishing for a miracle, even a small one, to ease her burden. Across town, Thomas, the local rancher, lived a life that seemed entirely different from Maria's, yet connected to hers in subtle ways. He was a man in his 40s, tall, with broad shoulders and a calm presence that seemed to settle even the most restless minds. His ranch was large but not extravagant, and he worked hard every day tending to his animals, repairing fences, and helping neighbors with their own problems whenever he could. Thomas was respected in Willow Creek, not because he demanded it, but because he had earned it through years of quiet strength and consistent acts of kindness. Though Thomas was well known in the town, he was not a man who sought attention. He lived modestly, rode his old horse to inspect the pastures, and often stopped by homes of people he had known since childhood, just to check in or lend a hand. The townspeople admired him, often commenting on how he seemed to carry the weight of the community on his shoulders without complaint. Yet, Thomas carried his own burdens, hidden behind a steady gaze and a reassuring smile. He had known struggle and disappointment, and it was those experiences that made him sensitive to the suffering of others. Maria and Thomas had crossed paths before, though only briefly. She remembered the day she had dropped a heavy box of supplies near the store, and Thomas had appeared seemingly out of nowhere to help her lift it. He had smiled gently, saying, "We all have heavy loads sometimes. Let's carry it together." At the time, it had seemed like a simple act of kindness, and Maria had smiled back, thanking him quietly. But little did she know that small encounter would foreshadow the moment when their lives would intersect in a way that changed everything. The days blurred together in Willow Creek. Maria's routine was unrelenting: wake up early, go to work, return home, help with the household chores, and try to find a few minutes to rest before the cycle began again. On some nights, she would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the exhaustion seep into her bones. She felt trapped in a life that demanded more than she could give, yet she had no clear way to escape the mounting pressure. Her dreams of a peaceful, happy life seemed more distant with each passing day, replaced by the constant struggle to simply survive. Despite the hardships, Maria had a quiet resilience. She had learned to find small moments of beauty wherever she could. Sometimes it was a bird landing delicately on her garden fence. Other times it was the sound of the river flowing nearby, or the laughter of children playing down the street. These small joys reminded her that the world was not entirely harsh, that life had pockets of grace even in the hardest times. But these moments, brief and fleeting, were never enough to erase the weight she carried. One evening, as Maria sat on her porch watching the last light fade from the sky, she felt a deep ache in her chest. The burden of expectation, responsibility, and exhaustion pressed down harder than usual. She thought of her family, of her coworkers, of her neighbors, and of all the people she tried to help while ignoring her own needs. And in that moment, she felt the raw honesty of her own despair. She realized she could not continue like this, not without some help, not without someone stepping in to share the load she had been carrying alone for far too long. At the same time, Thomas was finishing his day at the ranch. The sun had set, leaving a soft twilight over the fields, and he was checking on his animals before heading inside. As he walked through the pastures, he thought of the town, of the people he had helped over the years, and of the quiet satisfaction that came from doing good without expecting anything in return. There was a gentle rhythm to his life, a balance between work and compassion, and he took pride in the way he could make a difference without fanfare. Yet, even he could not foresee the urgency of what was about to come. That night, as Maria finally gave herself permission to feel her exhaustion fully, she did something she rarely did. She reached out for help. She sent a brief message to a friend in town, a simple plea, "I can't take it anymore, be quick." It was a cry born from months of quiet suffering, a signal that her strength had reached its limit. She did not know exactly what would happen next, but she knew that she could not remain trapped in her struggle alone. The message traveled quickly, as news always did in Willow Creek. The townspeople whispered about it, curious and concerned. And when it reached Thomas, he did not hesitate. He felt an immediate sense of urgency, a call to action that he could not ignore. Without overthinking or waiting for explanations, he prepared to intervene, guided by the simple principle that when someone reaches their limit, the right thing to do is act. As the night deepened and stars began to twinkle in the sky, a sense of anticipation hung in the air. Maria waited, tense and uncertain, while Thomas made his way toward her home. Neither of them knew exactly how the night would unfold, but both were about to be part of a story that would change their lives forever. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, the ordinary was about to give way to the extraordinary, and the actions of one person were about to show how courage, compassion, and swift action could make all the difference in the world. Maria did not yet know it, but this night would mark the beginning of a turning point, a moment when her silent struggle would meet the quiet strength of someone willing to step in and carry part of her burden. And in that intersection, hope, relief, and the promise of change would begin to take root, leaving a lasting impact not only on Maria's life, but on the entire town that watched in awe. The message had been sent. "I can't take it anymore, be quick." Short, urgent, and filled with raw emotion, it carried more weight than Maria could ever express with words. After hitting send, she sat back in her chair, heart pounding, palms clammy, and stomach tight with anxiety. She didn't know what would happen next. Part of her feared that no one would come, that she would remain alone in her struggle, that the walls of her home would close in on her like the weight of the world itself. Minutes stretched like hours. Each creak of the house, each rustle of the wind through the trees, seemed louder, sharper, as though the very night itself was listening to her despair. Her thoughts raced, jumping from fear to hope and back again. She thought of all the times she had held herself together for everyone else. Her younger siblings who depended on her for guidance, her parents who were tired but proud, and even her neighbors who occasionally looked to her for small favors or advice. She had carried their burden silently, and now, in her moment of vulnerability, she wondered if anyone would truly respond. Meanwhile, Thomas was already in motion. The moment he heard the message, he felt a familiar, compelling urge to act. Years of experience had taught him that when someone reached this point, when their words carried such urgent emotion, there was no time to hesitate. He didn't wait to understand all the details or question what exactly had happened. He simply prepared to go. He threw on his worn jacket, grabbed his lantern, and mounted his old horse, Rusty, whose steady gait mirrored the calm determination in Thomas's own heart. As he rode through the darkened streets of Willow Creek, the night seemed unusually quiet. The usual sounds of nocturnal animals were present, but there was an underlying tension in the air, as if the town itself sensed that something important was about to happen. Thomas's mind raced with questions, not about whether he should act, but about how best to help when he arrived. He knew that in moments like this, quick action and calm presence were more important than words. Back at her home, Maria paced the small living room, wringing her hands, her mind spinning with anxiety. She thought of what her life had become, a cycle of endless responsibility, frustration, and loneliness. She recalled mornings when she had gotten up before the sun, exhausted but determined to start the day for everyone else. She remembered nights when she had cried silently in her room, careful not to disturb anyone else, trying to make sense of her pain. And now, sending that desperate message felt like both a surrender and a lifeline. She hadn't expected anyone to come so quickly. The urgency in her words had been fueled by months of exhaustion, but the speed of the response startled her. When Thomas appeared on the edge of her property, lantern light flickering across his determined face, she felt a strange mix of relief, fear, and disbelief. She had known of him in passing, admired from afar the quiet way he helped others, but she had never imagined that he would appear at her doorstep at this exact moment, as if drawn by some invisible thread connecting their lives. Thomas dismounted calmly, letting Rusty graze quietly nearby. He took in the scene with careful observation, the worn furniture, the signs of long days and sleepless nights, the tension in Maria's posture, and the anxious look in her eyes. He spoke gently in a voice that carried both authority and warmth. "Maria, I received your message. Let's take this one step at a time. You're not alone anymore." Even as she listened, Maria's emotions churned inside her. Relief battled with embarrassment and vulnerability. She had spent so long hiding her struggles that opening herself to someone else felt terrifying. But there was something in Thomas's calm, steady demeanor that made it easier. She nodded slightly, barely able to form words, and allowed him to step into her world. The first step was simply listening. Thomas didn't rush her, didn't push for explanations, and didn't make assumptions. He sat with her, allowing silence to fill the space between them as Maria slowly found the courage to speak. She talked about her days, the endless chores, the financial struggles, and the emotional strain of always being responsible for everyone else. Her words tumbled out, sometimes incoherent, sometimes broken, but each one carried the weight of her lived reality. Thomas listened attentively, nodding occasionally, his eyes never leaving hers. He offered no judgment, only presence and understanding. In those moments, Maria realized that being heard was more powerful than any quick solution or advice. She realized that for the first time in a long time, someone genuinely cared about how she felt, not just what she did or how she appeared to the world. After listening, Thomas began to act. He didn't rush, but he moved decisively. First, he helped Maria with practical needs. Fetching food and supplies she had been too exhausted to manage, tidying up the small house to make it more livable, and addressing urgent household issues that had been neglected. Each task was simple, yet it lightened a part of the burden Maria had carried alone for so long. As he worked, he spoke calmly, encouragingly, reminding her gently that she didn't have to handle everything by herself. What amazed Maria most was the way Thomas seemed to understand exactly what needed to be done without being asked. It was as if he could see the invisible pressures that weighed on her, the hidden corners of her life where problems festered, and the moments where exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. His presence was a quiet force, steady and reliable, and it gave her a sense of safety she hadn't felt in years. Outside, neighbors began to notice activity at Maria's home. The small town was curious, as it often was, and whispers of concern began to circulate. But rather than causing embarrassment, Thomas's presence seemed to reassure those watching. They saw a man who acted without hesitation, with compassion and care, and they couldn't help but admire his courage. For many in Willow Creek, it was a reminder that in times of crisis, one person could make a profound difference with calm, decisive action. As the night wore on, Maria began to feel a shift inside herself. The tension in her chest eased slightly, the knot in her stomach loosened, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe freely. She realized that asking for help had not made her weak, it had made her human. She saw that vulnerability was not a flaw, but a bridge that allowed others to step in and share the weight she could no longer carry alone. Thomas remained by her side, helping where he could but also giving her space to recover. He encouraged small steps, reminding her that change didn't have to happen all at once. They talked quietly about her hopes for the future, the small dreams she had set aside, and the ways in which life could become lighter and more manageable. Maria began to see a path forward, one that did not require her to bear everything alone. By the time the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, the house had transformed in subtle ways. It wasn't just tidier, it felt alive again. The atmosphere had shifted from one of despair to one of cautious hope. Maria sat on the porch, sipping a cup of tea Thomas had made, feeling the warmth of both the beverage and the human kindness beside her. She realized that her life, though still filled with challenges, had been changed in a single night by the presence of someone willing to act decisively and with compassion. The townspeople would later speak of that night with awe, remembering how Thomas had responded so quickly and thoughtfully to a desperate plea for help. They marveled not at the drama of the situation, but at the quiet courage and humanity that had made all the difference. For Maria, it was a turning point. The moment she understood that she didn't have to carry her burdens alone, that help could arrive when least expected, and that human kindness could be both practical and deeply healing. By the end of part 2, Maria's life had begun to shift. The despair that had seemed endless had been met with decisive action, and hope had begun to creep back into her heart. She realized that while life would still present challenges, she now had a reminder that even in the darkest moments, people could step in and make a difference. The night had been transformative, not through grand gestures or dramatic rescues, but through the simple, profound power of being present, listening, and taking action when it truly mattered. And so, with the sun rising over Willow Creek, Maria's journey toward recovery, hope, and trust had begun, setting the stage for events that would continue to reshape her life and the lives of those around her. The next morning dawned quietly over Willow Creek. The sun rose slowly, casting soft light across the small town, turning the rooftops golden and the fields glimmering. For Maria, it was not just another day, it was the beginning of a new chapter. The night before had left an indelible mark on her life, a memory of someone stepping in when she had reached the limits of her strength. Thomas's calm presence had brought her relief, but she knew that true change would not happen instantly. Life's struggles were still there, waiting for her, but for the first time, she felt a sense of hope and possibility. Thomas had stayed overnight to ensure that Maria was safe and that immediate needs were met. The small kitchen of her home was quiet, but the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, a simple gesture that made Maria feel cared for in ways she hadn't experienced before. He moved with quiet efficiency, making breakfast, cleaning, and organizing the small household, all while offering words of reassurance. Maria watched him work, feeling both gratitude and curiosity. How could one person carry so much calm, so much strength, and so much understanding all at once? Once breakfast was ready, Thomas invited Maria to sit with him at the small wooden table in her kitchen. He didn't push, didn't demand explanations, and didn't rush her into making decisions. Instead, he spoke gently, asking simple questions about how she was feeling and listening intently to her responses. Maria found herself opening up more than she had in months, sharing details of her daily struggles, her frustrations, and even her small dreams that she had almost forgotten. Each word she spoke felt like a weight being lifted, and each nod from Thomas reassured her that she was being heard truly and deeply. After breakfast, Thomas suggested a walk outside to let the fresh morning air help clear Maria's mind. They stepped into the early sunlight, and Maria felt the warmth on her skin as a small comfort, something she hadn't realized she had missed. The world felt alive, yet peaceful, and Thomas led her gently along the familiar path near her home. As they walked, he spoke about life in practical but comforting ways, sharing lessons he had learned from years of hard work on the ranch and from helping others in the community. His words weren't patronizing or condescending. They were steady and grounded, offering guidance without judgment. At first, Maria was hesitant, still carrying the fear that opening up meant exposing her vulnerabilities. But Thomas's calm presence, combined with the gentle encouragement of his words, began to ease her anxiety. She realized that vulnerability didn't mean weakness. It meant trust, and in that trust there was strength. Slowly, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she could share her burdens, where help wasn't something to fear or reject, but a gift that made her stronger, not smaller. As they continued their walk, Thomas noticed small details that Maria had long ignored: overgrown shrubs, a broken fence post, the weight of dust and dirt from months of exhaustion. Without making her feel guilty, he offered to help, suggesting small, manageable steps to restore order in her home and surroundings. Maria marveled at how he could see what needed to be done without criticism, and how he could offer help in a way that respected her dignity. It was as though he had a natural talent for balancing care with action, knowing exactly when to step in and when to allow her space. By mid-morning, they returned to the house, and Thomas began tackling practical tasks with quiet determination. He organized the kitchen, repaired broken furniture, and even helped Maria sort through bills and paperwork that had been piling up for months. Each task was small, yet collectively they made a noticeable difference. For Maria, it was more than just the work. It was the realization that she didn't have to carry these burdens alone. Thomas's actions demonstrated that support could be both practical and compassionate, addressing immediate needs while also offering emotional reassurance. While they worked, neighbors began to notice the activity at Maria's home. The small town of Willow Creek was always curious, but instead of gossip, the sight of Thomas helping her sparked admiration. People whispered about the courage it took to step into someone else's struggle and offer help without hesitation. Some were inspired to reflect on their own actions, realizing that small acts of kindness could have a profound impact on someone in need. Thomas's example reminded the town that heroism doesn't always appear in dramatic gestures. Often, it's found in quiet, thoughtful actions performed when and where they are most needed. As the day progressed, Maria felt a gradual shift inside herself. The heavy tension that had gripped her chest for so long began to loosen. Her movements felt lighter, her thoughts clearer, and a sense of calm began to replace the constant anxiety that had dominated her life. She began to laugh softly at small jokes Thomas made, and even felt a spark of hope for the future, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. Thomas, ever observant, noticed the subtle changes. He didn't push or celebrate, understanding that recovery and adjustment take time. Instead, he offered encouragement in simple ways: a word of praise for completing a small task, a gentle reminder to take a break, and a quiet presence that allowed Maria to process her emotions safely. By being steady, patient, and compassionate, he created an environment in which Maria could begin to rebuild her sense of self and her confidence. Later in the afternoon, they took a break on the porch, watching the sun dip slightly toward the horizon. Thomas spoke about balance in life, emphasizing that it wasn't about avoiding challenges, but about learning to manage them and knowing when to ask for help. Maria listened, feeling a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in years. She realized that the burden she had carried alone for so long was not a reflection of her weakness, but rather a call for connection, an invitation for others to step in and share the weight. During this time, Maria also began to reflect on her dreams and aspirations. She had put them aside in order to meet the immediate needs of her family and home, but Thomas's encouragement reminded her that she deserved to care for herself too. Slowly, she began to articulate small goals for herself: a plan to organize her home better, a commitment to take breaks when she needed them, and even small steps toward pursuing a hobby she had long abandoned. Each idea was a tiny spark, but collectively they illuminated a path forward, a way to move from survival toward a life with purpose and joy. As evening approached, Thomas helped Maria prepare a simple dinner. They worked together, chatting casually about daily life, the community, and shared stories. The conversation flowed naturally, with laughter interspersed with moments of quiet reflection. For Maria, these were not just practical tasks. They were moments of connection, reminders that life could be lighter and more joyful when shared with someone who genuinely cared. By the time night fell, Maria felt transformed. Not completely, not instantly, but enough to know that change was possible. The despair that had seemed insurmountable was now tempered with hope, and the fear of facing life alone had been replaced with the knowledge that support could arrive, even in unexpected ways. Thomas's presence had provided both practical solutions and emotional guidance, showing her that courage and kindness often go hand in hand. The night closed over Willow Creek with a quiet sense of peace. Maria settled into her home with a newfound sense of security, knowing that help was not a sign of weakness, but a bridge to healing and strength. Thomas, having ensured that her immediate needs were met and that she felt safe and understood, prepared to leave but remain nearby, ready to step in whenever necessary. As the stars twinkled overhead, Maria reflected on the events of the day. She realized that life could be difficult, that struggles could feel overwhelming, but that moments of human kindness had the power to change everything. The experience had opened her heart, allowing her to trust, to hope, and to see the potential for a better life. She knew challenges would come again, but now she had the strength to face them with the knowledge that she was not alone. This day, which had begun with despair and uncertainty, ended with connection, support, and the first real glimmer of hope in months. Maria's life had shifted in a single day, not through grand gestures or sudden miracles, but through quiet, thoughtful actions and the unwavering presence of someone willing to act when it truly mattered. It was a turning point, the moment where despair met courage, and where hope began to take root in the heart of a weary young woman. The days following Thomas's intervention passed with a gentle, almost magical rhythm. Willow Creek had returned to its quiet pace, but for Maria, the world felt subtly, beautifully different. The despair that had weighed on her for so long had begun to lift, replaced by a growing sense of possibility. She had survived the night that had seemed unbearable, and more importantly, she had learned that she didn't have to face her struggles alone. Each day now brought small victories, quiet moments of relief, and an awakening of hope that had been buried for too long. Maria's neighbors began to notice the change. The once exhausted young woman who moved through her days with quiet resignation was now a little lighter, her steps a little surer, her smile more genuine. Some of them had witnessed Thomas helping her, and whispers of admiration spread throughout the town. Willow Creek was small, and news traveled fast. The story of Thomas's calm, decisive, and compassionate action had already begun to inspire those who heard it. People marveled not at the drama of the situation, but at the quiet heroism displayed by a man who acted without hesitation to help someone in need. For Maria, the days were filled with both practical tasks and personal reflection. She continued to receive Thomas's support, though now it was gentler and less urgent. He offered guidance, helped with chores when needed, and provided encouragement without ever overwhelming her. Slowly, she began to organize her home, sort through paperwork, and even tackle small projects she had neglected for months. Each task completed brought a sense of accomplishment, and each accomplishment strengthened her confidence. She realized that the life she had once thought unbearable could, in fact, be manageable with patience, planning, and support. One afternoon, Maria decided to take a walk through town, something she hadn't done in months. As she passed familiar streets, she noticed how differently she viewed the world. The old bakery smelled inviting instead of ordinary. The children playing in the park seemed joyful instead of noisy, and the soft breeze that drifted through the streets felt refreshing instead of burdensome. She realized that part of her despair had been fueled by isolation, by the belief that she had to bear life's challenges entirely on her own. Now, she understood the power of connection, of allowing others to share the weight when necessary. Thomas accompanied her during the walk, offering conversation and guidance. They spoke about small things, the town, the seasons, the animals on his ranch. But the conversation also gently touched on deeper topics: resilience, hope, and the importance of asking for help when life becomes too heavy to bear alone. Maria found herself speaking freely, sharing fears and dreams she had long suppressed. Thomas listened without judgment, offering insight only when it was helpful, and allowing her to discover strength within herself. The town, meanwhile, began to recognize the ripple effect of Thomas's actions. People who had once been bystanders to small struggles around them were inspired to help in their own ways. A neighbor offered to assist Maria with grocery shopping, another helped repair her garden fence, and yet another checked in regularly to ensure she was doing well. In a way, Thomas's intervention had awakened the community to the importance of noticing when someone was in need, and of acting with kindness and urgency. It was a quiet revolution of compassion, sparked by a single act of courage. Maria herself began to embrace this support. At first, it felt strange and uncomfortable, as if she were stepping into unfamiliar territory. But she quickly realized that accepting help did not diminish her worth or strength. Instead, it allowed her to focus on the aspects of life she could control, to rebuild her confidence, and to plan for a future that seemed brighter with each passing day. Simple tasks, once overwhelming, became manageable when shared with others, and Maria discovered a sense of relief she had not known for years. In her home, Thomas continued to serve as a steady guide, helping Maria navigate both immediate needs and long-term plans. He encouraged her to set small, achievable goals, to clean and organize her space, to manage her finances more effectively, and to take care of herself physically and emotionally. He reminded her that progress did not have to be immediate or perfect. What mattered was consistent effort and the willingness to accept support. Slowly, Maria embraced this approach, finding joy in small accomplishments and confidence in her ability to handle challenges. One morning, as they sat together on the porch drinking tea, Maria realized something profound. She had spent so much of her life carrying burdens that were never meant to rest on one pair of shoulders alone. She had believed that strength meant doing everything herself, But now she understood that true strength included knowing when to ask for help and accepting it gracefully. Thomas had shown her, through both words and actions, that compassion and courage could transform despair into hope. The transformation was not just internal, it manifested in her surroundings as well. Her home, once cluttered and neglected, now felt alive and welcoming. The garden, once overgrown, began to bloom again with flowers and vegetables nurtured by her care and occasional guidance from Thomas. Even the small repairs around the house, completed with his support, brought a sense of pride and accomplishment. For the first time in years, Maria felt that her life was not just about survival, it was about living fully, with intention and care. As the weeks passed, Maria's confidence grew. She began engaging with the community more, offering help where she could and forming deeper connections with neighbors. Her experiences had taught her empathy and patience, and she discovered that giving support to others could be just as fulfilling as receiving it. Thomas, observing this transformation, felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that his presence had helped spark a change that extended far beyond immediate needs. The town of Willow Creek, in turn, continued to marvel at the ripple effect. People spoke about Thomas's actions not as a single heroic event, but as a catalyst for community awareness and compassion. They admired the way he had balanced decisiveness with gentleness, action with patience, and practical help with emotional support. His example reminded everyone that heroism often takes the form of quiet acts performed with integrity, and that these acts can inspire others in ways that last far longer than the initial event. For Maria, the ripple effect was deeply personal. She realized that her struggle had not been ignored, and that the world was capable of responding with care and urgency when she reached out. She began to see life not as a series of burdens to be endured alone, but as a shared journey in which support, compassion, and connection played vital roles. This awareness brought not only relief, but a profound sense of gratitude, not just for Thomas, but for the community that had begun to awaken to the importance of kindness and human connection. In quiet moments, Maria reflected on how far she had come. She no longer felt trapped by despair. Instead, she felt empowered by the knowledge that help was available and that she could ask for it without shame or fear. She thought of Thomas's unwavering presence, the way he had acted decisively in her moment of need, and how his example had inspired others to act as well. She realized that courage and compassion were contagious, and that one person's willingness to step in could ignite a chain reaction of positive change. By the end of Part 4, Maria's life had undergone a remarkable transformation. She had moved from exhaustion and isolation to hope and engagement, from fear and despair to confidence and connection. The events of the past weeks had shown her that life, even in its most challenging moments, could be transformed through the simple but profound acts of listening, caring, and acting decisively. Thomas's presence had not only addressed immediate needs, but had set in motion a ripple effect that would continue to shape her life and the lives of those around her for months and years to come. And so, as the sun set once again over Willow Creek, casting its golden glow across the town, Maria felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Her journey was far from over, but the path ahead was now illuminated by hope, guided by the quiet courage of one man who had stepped in when it mattered most. In the gentle light of evening, she understood that life's burdens were not meant to be carried alone, and that sometimes a single act of kindness could leave everyone breathless, not with spectacle, but with the quiet power of human connection. Life in Willow Creek slowly settled into a new rhythm, yet for Maria, nothing would ever feel quite the same again. The days that followed Thomas's intervention had been transformative, not because of any sudden miracle, but because of the quiet, steady way he had helped her rebuild her life. The despair that once seemed endless had been replaced by hope, confidence, and a sense of connection she had long forgotten existed. Each day brought small victories, and each victory reinforced the knowledge that she no longer had to face life's challenges alone. Maria's home, once cluttered and burdened by neglect, now reflected her renewed energy and sense of purpose. She had taken Thomas's guidance to heart, tackling tasks she had long avoided and slowly organizing her space into something warm, welcoming, and manageable. The garden bloomed under her care. The small kitchen sparkled after careful cleaning, and even minor repairs had been completed with patience and diligence. Every change, no matter how small, served as a reminder that progress was possible and that her life could be more than just survival. Thomas remained a quiet presence in her life, offering guidance without judgment and assistance without intrusion. He helped her navigate daily challenges, shared practical advice, and encouraged her to continue setting achievable goals for herself. But he also allowed her the freedom to make her own decisions, empowering her to take control of her life, while knowing that support was always available if needed. His presence was a lesson in balance, showing that caring deeply for someone meant being there when necessary, yet giving space for personal growth and independence. As the days passed, Maria began to reconnect with the community in ways she hadn't before. She visited neighbors, helped at the local market, and even assisted with small events at the town hall. These interactions reminded her that life was not meant to be endured in isolation, but shared with others who could provide support, friendship, and encouragement. The town, inspired by Thomas's example, had become more attentive and compassionate, noticing when someone needed help and offering assistance without waiting to be asked. Maria found herself both giving and receiving kindness, experiencing the profound satisfaction of connection that she had long denied herself. Her family, too, began to notice the change. The tension and worry that had once filled the household gradually gave way to relief and joy. Her parents were amazed at her renewed energy and confidence, and her siblings looked to her with admiration rather than concern. The atmosphere at home shifted, no longer dominated by exhaustion and struggle, but by cooperation, understanding, and mutual support. Maria realized that by allowing herself to accept help and take steps toward change, she had also allowed her family to breathe, to relax, and to participate in a healthier, more balanced life together. Despite the progress, Maria knew that challenges would continue to arise. Life was never free from difficulties, but the difference now was her mindset. She had learned that struggle did not have to be faced alone, that support could be sought and accepted, and that even the smallest acts of courage and kindness could change the course of her life. She felt stronger, not because her problems had disappeared, but because she had discovered resilience, hope, and the power of human connection. Thomas's role in her life had also evolved. While he had once been a decisive figure stepping in during a moment of crisis, he now became a mentor and friend, someone whose wisdom and steady presence helped guide her through life's challenges. Their bond grew stronger, built on trust, respect, and gratitude. Maria admired his quiet courage and generosity, and she understood that his actions had not only changed her life, but had also demonstrated the impact one person can have on an entire community. The ripple effect of Thomas's intervention became more apparent as weeks turned into months. Neighbors who had witnessed his actions began to emulate his example, helping each other with small acts of kindness and support. Families checked on one another, friends offered guidance without judgment, and the town collectively became more attentive to the needs of its members. The small gesture of stepping in during a critical moment had grown into a culture of care and empathy, reminding everyone that even the simplest actions could leave a lasting impact. For Maria, this transformation was deeply personal. She reflected often on the night she had sent her desperate message, realizing that it had marked a turning point in her life. The fear and despair she had felt in that moment had been met with swift action, compassion, and understanding. Thomas had shown her that human kindness was not a theoretical concept, but a tangible force that could change lives when acted upon with sincerity and courage. She carried this lesson with her daily, allowing it to guide her decisions and shape her interactions with others. One afternoon, as she tended her now thriving garden, Maria paused to watch the sun dip behind the hills. The vibrant colors of the sky reminded her of the first time she had felt hope returning, the night Thomas had arrived. She thought about how far she had come, from exhaustion, isolation, and despair to a life filled with possibility, connection, and small, meaningful accomplishments. A deep sense of gratitude washed over her, not only for Thomas's help, but for the lessons she had learned about courage, compassion, and the importance of community. She also reflected on her own growth. Maria realized that she had discovered strength she had never known existed within her: resilience, patience, and the ability to face challenges with determination and grace. She understood now that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but a sign of wisdom and self-awareness. By accepting support, she had gained the power to transform her life and to create a future filled with hope and possibility. As time went on, Maria's life became a balance of responsibility and self-care, work and joy, giving and receiving. She continued to help her family and neighbors, but she no longer carried the weight of the world alone. Each day, she made choices that reflected both her needs and her compassion for others, embodying the lessons she had learned from Thomas's example. Life was still challenging, as it always would be, but now she faced it with a sense of purpose, confidence, and hope that had been absent for far too long. Thomas, quietly observing these changes, felt a deep satisfaction. He had acted in a moment of urgency, not seeking recognition, but simply responding to a human need. The impact of his actions had grown far beyond what he could have imagined, touching not only Maria's life, but the lives of those around her, and inspiring a community to be more compassionate and attentive. His quiet courage and steady presence had created a ripple effect, demonstrating the profound power of kindness and action. The story of that night, the night Maria had cried out, "I can't take it anymore, be quick," became a quiet legend in Willow Creek. People remembered it not for drama or spectacle, but for the lesson it carried. That decisive, compassionate action in a moment of need could transform despair into hope and inspire others to act with courage and kindness. It became a story told to remind the town that heroism often takes simple forms, performed by ordinary people willing to step in when it matters most. For Maria, the story was no longer just about fear or desperation. It was about growth, resilience, and the power of human connection. She had learned that life's challenges, while sometimes overwhelming, could be faced with support, understanding, and careful action. She had discovered that vulnerability was not a weakness, but a bridge to strength, trust, and meaningful relationships. As she looked forward to the future, Maria felt a profound sense of possibility. She understood that she could face challenges with courage, seek help when necessary, and continue building a life filled with purpose, connection, and joy. The night that had once seemed unbearable was now a symbol of transformation, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could arrive in the form of a steady, compassionate hand. And so, Maria's journey continued, shaped by the lessons of that pivotal night, the guidance of Thomas, and the awakening of a community inspired by courage and kindness. Her life, once dominated by despair and isolation, had been transformed by human connection, understanding, and action. She had discovered that one person's willingness to act decisively could leave everyone breathless, not with drama, but with the quiet, enduring power of compassion. As the sun set over Willow Creek, casting a golden glow across the fields and rooftops, Maria felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. She had survived, she had grown, and she had learned that life's burdens could be shared, its challenges faced, and its joys embraced. The town had witnessed the power of kindness and courage, and Maria had become a living testament to the transformative effect of human connection. Her heart was lighter, her mind clearer, and her spirit stronger. She knew that challenges would come again, as they always would, but she faced them now with hope, support, and a renewed sense of purpose. Life was not perfect, but it was real, meaningful, and filled with possibility. And in that realization, Maria understood the true lesson of the night Thomas had stepped in. That sometimes, the smallest acts of courage and compassion could change everything, leaving hearts and minds forever touched, inspired, and yes, breathless.